Everyone at the wedding thought Evelyn Hart came because she needed the money. That was the easy story. The sad ex-wife. The failed woman, the one who had gone from hosting charity dinners in a historic home to carrying appetizers through its back hallway while her former husband married someone younger upstairs. Daniel let people believe it. Vanessa enjoyed it. Even the bridesmaids whispered that Evelyn must have been desperate to accept a catering job at her ex-husband's wedding. But Evelyn had not accepted the job because she was desperate. She had accepted it because it was the only legal way back inside the house. For 3 months, Daniel had refused her calls. His attorney had returned every letter with the same clean sentence: Mr. Whitmore has sole authority over the property. The past matter is closed. But Evelyn knew one matter was not closed. Not Lily's room. Not the grief care fund. Not the missing appendix. Daniel had pretended no longer mattered after their daughter died. So, when the catering request came in under Vanessa Crane's name, Evelyn read the address, closed her eyes for 5 seconds, and said yes. Now she stood in the hallway outside Lily's room while strangers turned it into a bridal suite. A makeup artist sprayed perfume over the place where Lily's oxygen machine used to hum. A bridesmaid kicked a box of old belongings toward the door. And from inside that box came the faint metallic sound of something locked. Evelyn looked down. The music box. The one Lily had pressed into her hands the week before she died. The one Daniel later swore had never existed. Then Daniel's voice came from behind her. You always did have trouble letting go. Evelyn picked up a folded napkin and covered the box. No, she said quietly. I had trouble leaving things buried. Daniel's smile stayed in place because the bridesmaids were watching. Careful, he said. That sounds like a threat. It was an answer. Vanessa turned from the mirror, half-zipped into her wedding gown, diamonds bright at her throat. She looked Evelyn up and down as if examining a stain on expensive fabric. Daniel, Vanessa said, is this the caterer you mentioned? One bridesmaid laughed into her champagne. Evelyn did not correct her. This room had once smelled like lavender soap and strawberry medicine. Glow-in-the-dark stars had covered the ceiling because Lily said sleeping felt less lonely if the sky came indoors. Near the window, there had been a small white shelf where Lily kept paper birds folded from hospital pamphlets. Now, a rack of silk dresses stood there. Makeup brushes lay across Lily's old desk. On the floor, half under a garment bag, Evelyn saw one paper bird flattened beneath someone's heel. Her hand moved before she stopped herself. Not in front of Daniel. Not before she knew where the appendix was. The appendix had been a phrase first, not a document. Evelyn remembered Thomas Bell, the family attorney, sitting in this house years earlier while Lily slept in the next room. In the event of Lily's passing, Thomas had said, the protected portion of the property remains tied to its intended use. Her primary caregiver retains oversight. Daniel's pen had paused above the paper. That sounds excessive, he had said. Thomas answered gently, it is a safeguard. After the funeral, after the divorce, after Daniel's lawyers turned Evelyn's life into settlement language, that safeguard vanished from every file she could request. The main trust remained. The property transfer remained. The grief care fund Lily had asked them to create became a quiet footnote. But Appendix B was gone. And without it, Daniel could say the house was his to sell. Vanessa stepped closer. I hope this isn't uncomfortable for you, she said. Daniel told me you used to be very attached to this house. Evelyn folded the napkin over Lily's keepsake once more. I was attached to the people in it. Daniel placed a hand on Vanessa's waist. Evelyn has always been dramatic about objects, he said. Rooms, toys, old papers. She gives them more meaning than they deserve. Old papers. Evelyn looked at him. He should not have said that. Downstairs, a planner called 10 minutes to family photos. The bridesmaids began moving. Evelyn crouched as if to straighten a fallen linen and slid the folded napkin, with the blue box inside it, beneath the lower shelf of her service cart. A young woman in a black catering shirt appeared at the doorway. Grace Lynn was 23, sharp-eyed, and knew enough to the job that she still believed rich people became kinder when you did excellent work for them. Chef wants to know if we should start passing the crab cakes, Grace said. Hold for 5 minutes, Evelyn answered. Daniel laughed softly. Still giving orders in my house? Evelyn pushed the service cart into the hallway. No, she said. In my kitchen schedule. Grace followed her toward the service stairs. When they reached the landing, she whispered, "Are you okay?" Evelyn almost said yes. She had said yes too many times in this house. Yes to doctors. Yes to Daniel. Yes to lawyers who told her fighting would only make grief uglier. This time, she gave Grace the truth in a smaller shape. "I need you to keep this cart with me." Grace glanced back toward the old bedroom. "Was that yours?" "It was my daughter's."
I know what this is.
Grace did not
I'm
ask
sorry.
the next question. The kitchen was hot, bright, and crowded with motion. Pans hissed. Plates lined the prep tables. Staff moved in narrow lanes, pretending not to hear the music and applause from the ballroom. Evelyn had built her catering company in places like this after the divorce. Not under chandeliers. In heat, steam, and practical silence. At first, she cooked for memorial lunches and church receptions. Then for schools. Then for hospitals. Then, quietly, for the children who came to the grief center funded by the last clean piece of Lily's trust. Most of her staff knew none of that. They knew Evelyn paid on time. They knew she remembered allergies. They did not know this house had once been hers, or that if Daniel signed the sale tonight, the fund would lose the protection keeping it alive. A server entered carrying empty glasses. "They're asking about the first dance," he said. "Planner says the signing table needs to be cleared right after." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "Signing table? The one by the east windows. Leather folder, pens, some real estate guy guarding it like it's the cake." Evelyn crossed to the small service window facing the ballroom corridor. Daniel stood beside Thomas Bell near the east windows. Thomas had aged since Evelyn last saw him, white-haired and slightly folded, but his suit remained perfectly pressed. In his hand was a leather contract folder. Beside him stood Malcolm Reed, the developer who had tried twice to buy the property after Lily died. Evelyn remembered his letters. He had called the house emotionally underutilized real estate. Daniel shook Malcolm's hand. Then Daniel checked his watch. Loden Wushabafen. The first dance was scheduled for 7:10. The contract, according to the email Evelyn had found tucked inside the catering packet by mistake, was scheduled for 7:15. A second deadline struck her. Vanessa had ordered the blue room cleared before photos. Evelyn turned to Grace. "The boxes from upstairs. Where are they taking them?" "I saw 2 groomsmen carrying bags toward the back hall." Evelyn moved before Grace finished. At the end of the back hall, the trash room door stood open. 2 black bags sat beside the bins. One cardboard box had split at the corner, spilling old things onto the floor, a cracked plastic star, a ribbon from a hospital balloon, a book with Lily's name written inside the cover in uneven letters. Evelyn knelt. For a moment, she was beside a hospital bed again, helping a 6-year-old girl write her name without letting the IV line pull. Lily H. The H always leaned too far to the right. Grace whispered, "Mrs. Hart?" Evelyn placed the book back into the box. Then she checked the lower shelf of the service cart. The little blue keepsake was still hidden beneath the napkins. Its brass keyhole was filled with dust, and the lid would not open. Grace crouched beside her. "What's inside?" "I don't know," Evelyn said. That was not entirely true. She did not know what Lily had left inside it, but she knew what Lily used to hide behind it. There had been a narrow built-in cabinet beneath the window in Lily's room, painted the same white as the wall. Once, near the end, Evelyn had seen Thomas Bell hand Daniel a sealed envelope and say, "This copy should remain with the protected room file." Daniel had walked toward the child's room with it. The next day, when Evelyn asked where it was, he said Thomas had taken it back. Now she was no longer sure. Male voices entered the back hall. Evelyn pushed the cardboard box behind a laundry bin and tucked Lily's keepsake beneath a stack of clean napkins. Daniel appeared in the doorway with Malcolm Reed. His eyes dropped to Evelyn's knees on the floor, then to the hidden box behind her, then to the napkins in her hand. "Evelyn," he said, pleasant enough for Malcolm. "This is becoming a pattern." The bride's room had personal items mixed with trash.
We're not
Evelyn
going
said,
anywhere.
"My staff is making sure nothing fragile ends up in the service path." "How thoughtful," Daniel said. "But those items are no longer your concern." Grace's grip tightened around the napkins. Then Thomas Bell's voice came from the hallway. "Daniel." Everyone turned.
The US.
Thomas stood just outside the trash room, holding the leather contract folder against his chest. "I need to ask about Appendix B." Daniel did not move, but the warmth left his face. From the ballroom, the DJ announced that the first dance would begin in 10 minutes. The old clock chimed 7. Thomas Bell did not raise his voice. That made the question worse. Daniel stepped out of the trash room with the smooth patience he used on donors, contractors, and grieving relatives who asked questions. "Thomas," he said, "this is my wedding. I am aware. The documents have already been reviewed. Most of them have." Malcolm Reed looked from one man to the other. He was a broad-shouldered developer in a navy suit, with the impatient face of someone who measured every pause in dollars. From the ballroom came music, laughter, and the clink of glasses. Evelyn stood beside the laundry bin, one hand resting on the napkins hiding Lily's music box. Grace moved close enough to block the lower shelf of the cart. Thomas opened the folder just enough to show a clipped packet of papers. "The original trust file referenced an attachment," he said. "Appendix B, protected child welfare use. I do not see it here." Daniel's smile thinned. "Because it has no bearing on the sale. Then it should be easy to include." "It concerned Lily," Daniel said. "Lily is gone." The words landed without weight in his mouth, as if he had practiced, making them sound reasonable. Thomas looked down again. "The main trust says the appendix controls the protected portion of the property after Lily's death." Malcolm exhaled. "Daniel, we discussed clean title." "And you have it," Daniel said. "Thomas is being cautious. That is what I pay him for." "Not tonight you don't," Thomas said. For a brief second, Daniel's face showed something unpolished. Then the wedding planner hurried in with a headset pressed to one ear. "Daniel, Vanessa is ready. First, dance in 7 minutes, signing table cleared immediately after, just like you requested." Thomas turned his head. "Signing table?" The planner froze. Daniel gave her a look sharp enough to cut the sentence out of the air. "It is a private matter," he said. "Private matter." That was the phrase his attorney had used in every letter, the same phrase that made Evelyn a stranger to the house where Lily had learned to walk by holding the edge of the blue sofa. Malcolm checked his phone. "My people are scheduled for preliminary access tomorrow at 8. Thomas closed the folder. "No one enters for demolition while title questions remain open." "It is not demolition," Daniel said. "It is renovation." "Of Lily's room?" Evelyn asked. The hall tightened around the question. Daniel turned. "You were not invited into this conversation. You hired me to serve food beside it." Malcolm glanced toward the service cart. "This is the ex-wife?" Daniel's jaw shifted. "This is Evelyn," he said. "She runs the catering team. Not my former wife. Not Lily's mother." Evelyn filed away the omission. From the ballroom, the DJ's voice warmed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please gather near the dance floor as we welcome Daniel and Vanessa for their first dance." The planner whispered, "We really need to move." Daniel adjusted his cufflink though it was already straight. "Thomas, bring the folder to the east windows after the dance. We can clarify your concern there. I will not oversee a signing with a missing controlling document. You are embarrassing yourself." "No," Thomas said. "I am protecting the record." Malcolm stepped closer to Daniel. His voice dropped, but not enough. If this slips past tonight, the price changes. I have another property waiting. There it was. Not romance. Not closure. A transaction with champagne poured over it. Daniel nodded once. Nothing slips. He looked back at Evelyn. And nothing from this house leaves with the staff. Grace stiffened. Evelyn rested her fingers on the napkins. The little blue box beneath them felt smaller than memory should feel. Then check the trash bags, Evelyn said. Someone almost threw away a child's belongings. Daniel's eyes moved to the laundry bin. Before he could answer, Vanessa appeared at the end of the corridor in her gown, bright and impatient. Daniel, she called, people are waiting. She looked at Evelyn beside the discarded box, then at Thomas with the folder, then at Malcolm standing too close to the groom. A tiny crease formed between her brows. What is this? Daniel crossed to her and offered his arm. Nothing you need to carry tonight. Vanessa accepted the arm, but her gaze remained on the folder. Evelyn saw it. So did Grace. As Daniel led Vanessa toward the ballroom, Thomas stayed behind, his eyes lowered to the box of Lily's things. I remember paper birds, he said quietly. Evelyn did not trust herself to answer. Thomas slipped a yellow note from his folder and placed it on the service cart beneath a stack of plates. East window table, he murmured, after the dance. Then he followed the groom. Grace waited until his footsteps faded. What did he give you? Evelyn lifted the plates. The note held 3 words and a time. Missing page. 7:15. In the ballroom, the first notes of the wedding song began. The wedding song softened first, like the room was being trained to become sentimental. Guests gathered around the dance floor. For a moment, the house looked the way Daniel wanted it to look, elegant, generous, untouched by anything inconvenient. Evelyn entered from the service side with a tray of sparkling water. Grace followed 2 steps behind, watching the cart as if it held glass instead of a hidden keepsake. At the east windows, the signing table had been dressed like part of the wedding decor, white roses. 2 silver pens. The leather folder placed between them. Malcolm Reed stood nearby, pretending to admire the garden while checking his watch. Thomas Bell stood farther back with both hands around his own folder. Daniel took Vanessa's hand and led her to the center of the ballroom. The guests applauded. Vanessa smiled like the room belonged to her already. Then Daniel lifted one finger toward the DJ. The music lowered. Before I dance with my wife, Daniel said, accepting a microphone from the planner. I hope you'll allow me one small toast. A ripple of approval moved through the guests. Evelyn kept walking, pouring water into glasses along the outer tables. The videographer turned his camera toward Daniel. Daniel smiled at Vanessa first, then at the room. Tonight is about new beginnings, he said. Real new beginnings. The kind that require courage. Vanessa lowered her eyes with practiced modesty. For too long, Daniel continued, this house has been associated with sorrow. With rooms no one was allowed to touch. With memories that became walls. Evelyn reached the table closest to the windows. Her hand remained steady around the bottle, but Grace noticed the pause before she filled the next glass. Daniel knew exactly where she was standing. He had placed her there. And I want to thank Vanessa, he said, for reminding me that love is not meant to live in a museum. Soft laughter, softer applause. Daniel's mother dabbed at her eye with a napkin. She had not called Evelyn in 6 years, not on Lily's birthday. Some people hold on because grief becomes an identity, Daniel said. The sentence slipped into the room dressed as wisdom. Several faces turned toward Evelyn. A man who had once carried Lily on his shoulders looked down at his plate. Vanessa took the microphone from Daniel with a laugh. I wasn't going to speak, she said. But since Daniel mentioned courage, the bridesmaids cheered. Vanessa looked across the room until she found Evelyn. There is something beautiful, Vanessa said, about choosing a future even when the past is still standing right in front of you. The guests laughed more clearly this time. Evelyn set the bottle down before the glass could overfill. Grace stepped closer, anger tightening her face. "Don't," Evelyn murmured. Vanessa went on. "Daniel told me this house had been frozen for years. I told him a home should not be a shrine. It should be alive." Applause rose. At the signing table, Malcolm nodded as though the toast were part of the sales pitch. Daniel reclaimed the microphone. "That is why tonight, after our first dance, Vanessa and I will take the first step toward giving this house a new life." The planner's smile faltered. Daniel had moved the announcement earlier than planned. Vanessa's smile changed too. Only slightly. She had known there would be renovation documents after the reception. Daniel had called them formalities, design approvals, a way to free the house from old grief. He had not said the first public act of their marriage would be a sale. A family residence should serve the living, Daniel said. "So, we have chosen to release this property into a development that will restore its value and help fund the next chapter of our lives." One guest whispered, "He's selling it tonight?" Another replied, "Apparently." Evelyn heard the word release and thought of hospital forms. Released from care. Released from responsibility. Released because someone no longer wanted to keep watch. Daniel turned slightly toward the service station. "And I am grateful," he said, "that even those connected to a painful chapter could be here to witness this transition with grace." The camera followed his gaze. Evelyn became part of the official wedding video. Not as Lily's mother. As staff. A server in black, holding an empty water bottle beside the table where her daughter's room was about to be sold. Daniel lowered the microphone. "Evelyn," he said warmly, "thank you for helping us serve tonight." The guests clapped because they did not know what else to do. Grace's eyes flashed. Evelyn gave Daniel the smallest nod. Not forgiveness. Not agreement. A receipt. People revealed themselves when they thought service workers were only background. They spoke near trays. They signed near coffee stations. They mistook uniforms for absence. The videographer was still filming. Thomas Bell had heard the announcement. Vanessa had heard a sale described in front of guests before she had read a single page. And Malcolm Reed had just opened the leather folder before the dance had even begun. Evelyn placed the empty bottle on her tray and moved toward the signing table. The DJ raised the music again. Daniel offered Vanessa his hand. As they took their first step together, Grace leaned toward Evelyn and whispered, "What do we do now?" Evelyn looked at the clock. "Tidenlingjofen." Then she looked at the two silver pens, waiting under the white roses. "We make sure no one signs before the song ends," she said. The first dance was supposed to last 4 minutes. Daniel had chosen a song with a long instrumental opening and a clean ending, the kind wedding planners loved because it told everyone when to clap. Evelyn had read the timeline twice. Dance at 7:10. Signature at Sept Kins. Cake photographs at 7:20. Every minute had been polished until it could hide a crime. Evelyn crossed behind the outer tables with the empty water bottle on her tray. Grace stayed near the service cart, one hip angled protectively toward the lower shelf. At the east windows, Malcolm Reed had already uncapped one of the silver pens. Thomas Bell placed his palm over the contract folder. "Not until the file is complete," he said. Malcolm's smile was thin. "Counselor, I was told this was ceremonial. The legal review was finished. It was represented to me as finished." Daniel turned Vanessa through the slowest part of the song. His face remained soft for the guests, but his eyes kept cutting toward the windows. Vanessa noticed. She followed his glance and saw Malcolm, the pens, Thomas's closed hand. Her steps changed by half a beat. Daniel leaned closer to her ear. Whatever he said made her smile return, but it did not reach her eyes. Evelyn set the tray on a sideboard and picked up a fresh coffee pot. Grace whispered, "Coffee now?" On the signing table. "That table doesn't have coffee service." "It does now." Grace understood quickly. She took cups, saucers, sugar, anything that would require space and hands and attention. Together they reached the east windows just as Malcolm tried to slide the folder out from under Thomas's palm. "Coffee, for the gentleman," Evelyn said. Malcolm frowned. "We didn't ask." "Bride's hospitality package," Evelyn replied. Thomas looked at her over the rim of his glasses. A small pause passed between them. Then he moved his hand just enough for Evelyn to see the top page. Property transfer agreement. Below it, in Thomas's neat handwriting on a sticky flag, Appendix B, protected child welfare use. Absent. Daniel had lied about the name of it. Not Lily Appendix. Not sentimental attachment. Protected child welfare use. Evelyn poured coffee slowly. From the dance floor, applause started too early. Daniel had cut the song short. He walked toward them with Vanessa on his arm. "Thomas," Daniel said, pleasant for the watching guests. "This is not the time." It became the time when you scheduled a real estate execution during your reception. Vanessa's head turned toward Daniel. "Execution?" she asked. "Legal language," Daniel said. "No," Thomas replied. "Precise language." Daniel placed his hand on the folder. The appendix was drafted when Lily was alive. It no longer controls anything. Thomas opened the trust summary to a marked paragraph. It says the opposite. Upon Lily's death, the protected room, the attached fund, and any conversion of the space require oversight from the primary caregiver. Malcolm set down the pen. "Converted?" Daniel noticed Evelyn still pouring coffee. "That's enough." Her hand stopped. Thomas continued. "Daniel, where is the attachment?" "With old medical records, probably." "Storage?" "Irrelevant boxes." "Then retrieve it." "During my wedding?" "You scheduled the signing during your wedding." A guest near the windows stopped pretending not to listen. Evelyn saw Vanessa's mother approach, her smile fixed and brittle. "Is there a problem?" the woman asked. "No," Daniel said. "Yes," Thomas said. Grace took one cup from Evelyn and set it in front of Malcolm, forcing him to step back from the folder. Thomas lowered his voice. "If that appendix exists and you knowingly excluded it, this is no longer a title question. It becomes misrepresentation." Daniel's fingers curled once against the tabletop. Evelyn saw the movement. So did Vanessa. "Daniel," Vanessa said, quieter now, "you told me the house was clear." "It is clear." "Then why is he asking for a document you never mentioned?" Daniel looked at Evelyn instead of answering his bride. "There is no document in this house that belongs to you." Evelyn placed the coffee pot down. "Then you won't mind if Thomas looks." His expression changed in a way too small for the room to read and too sharp for Evelyn to miss. The DJ announced cake photographs in 5 minutes, trying to save the schedule. Malcolm checked his phone again. "We need this resolved before my office closes the wire window." Thomas closed the folder and held it against his chest. "Then no one signs until I inspect the protected room file." Daniel said nothing. Evelyn knew why. The protected room file had once been kept in the built-in cabinet under Lily's window. And upstairs, Lily's room was full of bridesmaids, perfume, and trash bags waiting to be carried out. Grace leaned close. "Tell me where to go," she whispered. Evelyn looked at the staircase. "Back to the room," she said. "The cabinet under the window. Look for anything that points to the lock." Grace reached Lily's room before the bridesmaids did. The hallway outside it had changed in less than 15 minutes. Garment bags were gone from the doorframe. Makeup cases were half closed. Someone had sprayed more perfume, too sweet and too heavy, as if scent could cover the fact that strangers had emptied a child's room for photographs. Grace stepped inside with a stack of folded towels against her chest. "Bride requested fresh towels," she said to no one in particular. One bridesmaid looked up from her phone. "Put them anywhere. They're taking the old junk down now." "Old junk." Grace looked toward the window. The built-in cabinet was still there beneath the sill, painted white, nearly hidden behind the vanity chair. Its lower lock was small enough to look decorative. Above it, A loose floor vent sat open by half an inch. That difference mattered only because Evelyn had taught Grace, in the kitchen, to notice what did not match. Grace set the towels on the vanity and moved closer. Behind her, another bridesmaid said, "Wait, are you staff allowed to touch things in here?" Grace smiled without warmth. Only the things people plan to throw away. In the back hall downstairs, Evelyn watched Daniel walk toward Thomas with the careful speed of a man trying not to look hurried. She could not follow Grace. Not yet. If she left the ballroom area now, Daniel would send someone after her. So she stayed where he wanted to see her, close enough to the service station to look harmless, close enough to the east windows to hear every word. Malcolm Reed was on his phone near the curtains. "No, don't release the crew," he muttered. "Just hold them. We may need to adjust language." Thomas stood with the folder closed. "Daniel, I need access to the room file. You will have it after the reception. The signing is during the reception." Daniel's voice stayed low. "You are letting Evelyn turn a private grief into a public obstruction." Evelyn picked up a tray of champagne flutes and walked between them before Thomas could answer. "Refill?" Daniel stared at her. Thomas took a glass. "Thank you," he said. The interruption bought 8 seconds. Upstairs, Grace crouched near the cabinet. The lower lock was real. The floor vent beside it was loose. Grace had no screwdriver. She had a butter knife wrapped in a towel. She turned the first screw with a dry scrape. The second resisted. From the hallway came Vanessa's voice. "I want these boxes gone before Daniel comes up. He gets sentimental when people make a scene." Grace froze. Another woman answered, "The old kid stuff?" "Yes, all of it. Trash room, then out back. I don't want it in the photos." Grace twisted harder. The second screw gave. She lifted the vent cover just enough to look inside. No envelope, no folder, only dust, a dead battery, and a small strip of blue ribbon. Grace reached in anyway. Her fingers brushed something flat wedged along the side. She pulled it free, a photograph, Lily in pajamas, sitting by the window with the pale blue music box on her lap. Beside her, younger Evelyn was kneeling near the built-in cabinet, one hand resting on the lower lock. On the back, in uneven child handwriting, were 5 words. "Mommy hides safe things here." Grace's throat tightened. Then the bridesmaid appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" Grace slid the photo under the towel stack. "Checking a loose vent," she said. "Someone could trip." The woman narrowed her eyes. "With a knife?" Catering solves problems creatively. Downstairs, the DJ announced cake photographs again. "Tiden Schersenfen." Evelyn saw the clock, then saw Daniel signal to one of the groomsmen. The man headed for the back staircase. He was going after the boxes. Evelyn moved. Not toward Daniel. Toward Vanessa. The bride stood near the edge of the ballroom, watching the signing table with an expression she had not worn in front of the guests. "Your veil," Evelyn said. Vanessa blinked. "What?" "It's caught on the bracelet clasp." It was not. Not badly. But Vanessa looked down, and Evelyn stepped close enough to lower her voice. "If Daniel told you the sale was only paperwork, ask why he needs my signature erased before dessert." Vanessa's eyes sharpened. "Your signature?" Evelyn gently freed the veil from a diamond bracelet. "Ask him about the waiver." Before Vanessa could respond, the groomsman returned from the stairs with 2 black bags. Grace followed behind him, carrying the folded towels. Her face was carefully blank. Daniel noticed the bags. "Put those outside," he said. Grace's hand dipped once to the service cart as she passed Evelyn. A folded towel landed beside the napkins. Inside it was the photograph. Evelyn saw the childish writing on the back. "Mommy hides safe things here." That night, the music box became more than a memory. It became a map. Thomas stepped to the table. "Daniel," he said, "we inspect the room now, or I mark the file incomplete in front of every witness here." Daniel's eyes moved from Thomas to Evelyn, then to the towel in her hand. The old clock above the mantel clicked towards 7:14. A minute should have been nothing. At weddings, a minute disappeared inside applause, camera flashes, and someone fixing the bride's train. But this minute had teeth. Thomas Bell held the contract folder against his chest and waited for Daniel to answer. Malcolm Reed tapped the silver pen against the table. I have a wire window and a demolition hold that costs money by the hour. Vanessa looked at him. Demolition? Daniel turned on Malcolm with a smile that asked for silence and threatened consequences at the same time. Preliminary access, he corrected. Nothing more. Evelyn saw Vanessa's face shift. Not guilt. Not kindness. Calculation. A bride realizing the vows had come with hidden paperwork. Grace stood near the service cart with the towel stack in her arms. The photograph of Lily was now under Evelyn's palm. Mommy hides safe things here. Not the vent. The cabinet. And not the cabinet alone. The box. Evelyn's eyes moved to the blue music box beneath the napkins. Daniel saw the glance. Search the cart, he said. Grace stepped in front of it. For what? For anything removed from upstairs. Thomas lifted his chin. Daniel, be careful. Daniel answered softly, careful enough for nearby guests to mistake it for restraint. I have been careful for years. I let this house become a monument to one tragedy. I let practical decisions turn into moral accusations. Tonight, I am ending that. Evelyn folded the photograph once and slipped it into the pocket of her catering jacket. Then she picked up Lily's keepsake. Gasps moved through the nearest guests as they recognized the object without understanding it. Daniel's mother covered her mouth. Vanessa looked at the box, then at Daniel. What is that? My daughters, Evelyn said. Daniel's voice sharpened. Our daughters. Yes, Evelyn answered, when it helps you sound wounded. The sentence landed harder than a shout. Daniel took one step toward her. Thomas moved slightly between them. You do not get to perform motherhood in the middle of my wedding, Daniel said. Evelyn looked at the bride, the guests, the roses on the signing table, the contract waiting like a blade under flowers. I didn't come here to perform anything. Grace's eyes moved to her. Neither had planned for this part. Evelyn had hoped to find the appendix quietly, hand it to Thomas, and leave through the service door before the cake was cut. She had wanted the truth to do the work without dragging Lily's name through the reception. But Daniel had already put Lily in the room. He had done it with the toast, with the trash bags, with the contract. So Evelyn stopped protecting him from the ugliness he had arranged. When Vanessa Crane's catering request came in, Evelyn said, I knew the address before I knew the menu. Daniel laughed once. So, you admit you came under false pretenses? No. I came under a signed vendor agreement. A few guests looked toward the planner, who suddenly became fascinated by her headset. For 3 months, Evelyn continued, I asked for the protected room file. For 3 months, your attorney said you had sole authority. Then tonight, by mistake, someone included the sale schedule in the catering packet. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Thomas turned his head toward Daniel. Evelyn held up the music box. I accepted the job because it was the only legal way back inside this house before you sold it. Vanessa's face lost its wedding softness. You knew? She asked Daniel. Daniel ignored her. This is exactly what I mean, he told the guests. She cannot let grief stay private. She turns it into accusation. Evelyn met his eyes. You turned it into real estate. The guests nearest the windows stopped moving. Grace set the towel stack down and faced the room. He had staff throwing away the child's things. Daniel looked at her as if a chair had spoken. You are dismissed. I work for Mrs. Hart, Grace said. A small but important correction. Evelyn placed the little blue box on the signing table beside the silver pens. Its lid looked almost childish against the white roses. Lily used to hide notes in this, she said. She thought anything with music was safe because no one threw music away. Daniel's eyes dropped to the box. Fear touched the edge of his mouth first. Thomas saw it. Evelyn turned the box over. The old keyhole was not on the front, as Grace had thought. It was beneath the base, hidden under a strip of worn felt. Lily had shown her once during a hospital night when sleep would not come. Evelyn peeled back the felt. A tiny brass key slid into her palm. Vanessa whispered, "Daniel." Evelyn held up the key. "This does not open the music box," she said. Thomas understood before anyone else. The room file cabinet. Daniel reached for the key. Grace moved the cart between them. Malcolm stepped back from the table. Across the room, the videographer kept filming because nobody had told him to stop. The clock changed to 7:15. No pen touched paper. Daniel Whitmore now had to watch someone else decide what happened next. Daniel moved faster than anyone expected. Not toward the key. Toward the story. He lifted both hands, palms open, the gesture of a man calming a room. The guests closest to the windows leaned in, relieved to be given a shape for what they were watching. "All right," Daniel said. "This has gone far enough." Evelyn kept the brass key closed inside her fist. Thomas stepped beside her. "Daniel, do not turn this into theater." "It became theater when my ex-wife brought a child's keepsake into my wedding reception and accused me in front of my family." "You scheduled a property signing beside the dance floor," Thomas said. "And she came prepared to sabotage it." He turned to Malcolm. "This is why I wanted the acknowledgement signed first." Evelyn looked up. "What acknowledgement?" Daniel signaled to the planner, who pulled a cream folder from beneath the guest book table. Vanessa watched the folder appear with a colder expression than before. Daniel removed a single page. "Because I anticipated an emotional disruption," he said, "I prepared a standard release. It states that Evelyn Hart acknowledges she has no ownership claim, no authority over the property, and no right to remove items from the premises." Grace made a small sound. "You had that ready?" Thomas reached for the page. Daniel let him see it but not hold it. "This is not standard," Thomas said. "It is protective. It is coercive." Daniel smiled without warmth. "Interesting choice of word from the man who let Evelyn walk into my wedding with a hidden agenda." Evelyn felt the guests turning again, pulled by the simplest version of events. A bitter ex-wife. A secret plan. A box taken from a private room. Daniel pointed at the music box on the table. "That belongs to the estate inside this house." "It belonged to Lily," Evelyn said. "And Lily was my daughter as much as yours." "Then why was it in a trash bag?" The question found its way past the polished surfaces. Daniel's face hardened, then smoothed. "Because grief creates clutter. Because someone had to make decisions you refused to make." Vanessa's mother stepped forward. "Perhaps this should be handled privately." Daniel took that opening. "Yes," he said. "Evelyn can sign the release, return anything she removed, and we can all stop humiliating Lily's memory." Evelyn looked at the page. There it was, typed cleanly near the bottom. Vendor and former spouse waiver of property interest. Former spouse. Not mother. Not trustee. Not caregiver. A category small enough to erase everything that mattered, Thomas said. "She should not sign that." Daniel turned to him. "Then you are no longer acting as neutral counsel." "I was never neutral about fraud." Malcolm muttered, "This is getting expensive." Daniel leaned close to Evelyn, his voice dropping beneath the music. "If you do not sign," he said, "I call security. I report theft. I remove your staff from the property. Your company loses this contract, and every guest here learns you used a catering job to steal from a wedding." Grace stepped forward. "She didn't steal." Daniel looked at her at last. "You helped conceal property. Choose your next sentence carefully." Grace's face paled, but she did not step back. Evelyn opened her hand and looked at the brass key. The old reflex returned. Protect the job, protect the staff, protect everyone else from Daniel's anger. She had done that through Lily's illness, through his absences, through divorce meetings where speaking too sharply made her look unstable. Then she saw the videographer near the flowers, camera still raised. She placed the key on the table, not into Daniel's hand, beside the waiver. If this is only about property, Evelyn said, then let Thomas open the file cabinet with everyone watching. Daniel's jaw tightened. There is no cabinet. Thomas turned to him. You told me the protected room file was in storage. It may be. Which is it? Daniel folded the waiver once, leaving a crease across Evelyn's printed name. Vanessa was looking at the waiver. Daniel, she said, why is my company listed under future beneficiary? The room shifted toward her. Daniel's expression sharpened. Not now. Vanessa held out her hand. Give it to me. It is business language. It is my name. Evelyn understood then. The waiver was not only meant to silence her, it was meant to clear a path for the sale proceeds to move through Vanessa's design company after the wedding. Daniel took the page back before Vanessa could read further. But the damage had entered. Thomas picked up the brass key. We are going upstairs, he said. Daniel blocked the staircase with his body. No one enters that room until Evelyn signs. Evelyn looked at the crease across her name, then at Lily's music box under the lights. No, she said. You don't get my signature to bury hers. The word hers made Daniel flinch. But Vanessa saw it. Daniel did not shout for security. He smiled for the guests and lowered his voice for the people close enough to matter. Thomas, Evelyn, Malcolm, he said, we are going to step away from the windows and handle this privately. No, Thomas said. Daniel's eyes stayed on Evelyn. Then I will ask the planner to clear the room. You can clear a ballroom, Thomas replied. You cannot clear the record. Vanessa stood beside Daniel with the waiver bright in her mind. Future beneficiary. Her company name, tucked into a document she had never seen, attached to a house she had been told was clean. She had spent a year convincing herself Daniel's grief was elegant, manageable. He spoke of Lily with a careful sadness that made him seem deep rather than damaged. He spoke of Evelyn as if she were a woman who had chosen sorrow because it gave her power. Vanessa had believed most of it. Believing him had made it easier to enjoy winning. But now, Daniel's hand rested on the staircase rail like a lock, and the music box sat beside the waiver like a witness. Vanessa touched his sleeve. Daniel, she said, why is my company in that paper? He turned just enough to give her his profile. Because the proceeds will support our future. We discussed that. We discussed renovation projects. Not a release from your ex-wife. We are not doing this in front of staff. Evelyn heard the word and saw Vanessa hear it too. Staff. Anyone below Daniel became furniture when he needed a room to agree with him. Malcolm stepped in, voice tight. I need certainty. If Evelyn Hart has oversight rights, I should have been told before tonight. She has no rights, Daniel said. Then why draft a waiver? The question came from Vanessa. Daniel looked at her fully now. A groom should not look at his bride that way on their wedding night. Not like she had spoken out of turn in a meeting. You are emotional, he said. Vanessa's lips parted. Evelyn watched the sentence enter her. It was the same blade with a new handle. Daniel reached for Vanessa's hand. Come with me. 2 minutes. Vanessa let him guide her toward the side corridor near the library, away from guests but not sound. Evelyn could not follow, but Grace could move with a tray. She picked up 6 untouched champagne glasses and slipped toward the corridor wall. Daniel stopped beside a closed pocket door. Vanessa pulled her hand free. Tell me what I signed onto. You signed onto a life, Daniel said. A good one. I asked about my company. The proceeds move through Crane Design because it is cleaner for the development package. You get visibility, I get liquidity. Malcolm gets a closing. Except Evelyn. Daniel laughed under his breath. Evelyn had years to be reasonable. And Lily's fund? She turned that fund into a leash. Grace stood behind a floral arrangement, tray tilted just enough to look busy. Daniel continued, after tonight, Vanessa, you sign the operating consent, Malcolm releases the first wire, and this house stops being a mausoleum. If Evelyn raises her voice, people will see what I have dealt with for years. If she refuses the release, we have documentation that she was offered a clean exit, and if anything leaves this property with her staff, it becomes a security issue. Vanessa's face changed by degrees. You planned for her to react. I planned for her to be herself. And me? Daniel's answer came too quickly. You'll sign what I put in front of you because you understand opportunity. Grace nearly dropped the tray. Vanessa stepped back. There was no slap. Only the small, humiliating silence of a woman recognizing that the throne she had been offered was a chair with wheels. Daniel softened his voice. That came out wrong. No, Vanessa said. It came out prepared. He reached for her again, but she turned toward the ballroom. I need a minute. Vanessa. I said a minute. When she passed Grace, their eyes met. Vanessa saw the tray, the untouched glasses, and the phone half visible in Grace's apron pocket. Grace had not recorded the conversation, but Vanessa had. Her own phone was in her hand, screen dark, voice memo still running beneath her thumb. Back at the signing table, Evelyn stood beside Thomas while Malcolm argued about wire deadlines. Vanessa approached the table and picked up the waiver before Daniel could return. Thomas said, Mrs. Whitmore. Not yet, Vanessa said. The correction cut sharper than she intended. She looked at Evelyn without performance. If this paper clears my company to receive money from the sale, Vanessa asked, and the sale violates your daughter's trust, what does that make me? Daniel entered behind her. It makes you confused. Vanessa folded the waiver and held it against her bouquet. No, she said. It makes me careful. Then she took a picture of the page with her phone. Daniel's face lost color. Evelyn saw it and understood. Vanessa had not chosen a side. But she had chosen not to be blind. Daniel reached for Vanessa's phone. She pulled it back before his fingers touched the screen. A bride should not have to defend evidence from her husband 20 minutes after vows, but Vanessa held the phone against her bouquet and looked at him as if the veil had finally lifted from the wrong face. Daniel understood the danger before the guests did. So he turned to the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice carrying over the low music. I apologize. This private family matter has been dragged into our celebration. Thomas Bell stepped toward the staircase with the brass key in his hand. Daniel raised his arm to stop him. No one goes upstairs until I make something clear. The videographer kept filming. Daniel pointed at Evelyn without looking at her. My former wife came here under a catering contract she accepted deceptively. She removed personal property from a private room. She interrupted a lawful transaction. Now she is attempting to use our daughter's memory to claim authority she does not have. A few guests shifted. The story was ugly, but it was simple. Daniel knew simple stories traveled fastest. She is grieving, Daniel said. I respect that. But grief does not create ownership. It does not give someone the right to hold a home hostage forever. Malcolm Reed looked relieved. This version could still become paperwork. Daniel held up the waiver. I asked Evelyn to sign a release confirming what is already true. She refused. That is her choice. But this sale will proceed. Wave 1 arrived dressed as sympathy. A public lie with polished edges. Thomas opened his folder. No, he said. The word did not need volume. Thomas placed the trust summary on the table and tapped the marked paragraph. The sale cannot proceed while Appendix B is missing. You have a summary, Daniel said. I have a summary that refers to a controlling attachment. I have a waiver drafted to extinguish Evelyn Hart's potential claim. I have a buyer who expected access by morning. And I have your public statement recorded minutes ago, claiming Evelyn had agreed to a transition she never approved. Daniel's smile became work. Thomas, you are speculating. I am reading. Thomas held up the brass key. And I am going upstairs to the room where the protected file was last kept. Daniel stepped into his path. Then I revoke your authority as counsel. Thomas nodded once. You may replace me tomorrow. You cannot erase what I witnessed tonight. Vanessa moved beside Thomas. I want the room opened. Daniel stared at her. You do not understand what you are doing. I understand my company was named in a document you hid from me. Grace pushed the service cart forward. And I understand he ordered the child's things thrown out before anyone could inspect them. Daniel cut his eyes toward her. You are staff. Grace's voice held. I am also a witness. Guests began looking at the trash bags near the back hall, the music box, the folded waiver, the signing pens. Thomas lifted the key again. If there is nothing upstairs, he said, you lose nothing by letting me look. Daniel's answer came too late. They all heard the delay. Evelyn picked up the music box and walked toward the staircase. Daniel blocked her first step. You always wanted an audience, he said under his breath. No, Evelyn answered. I wanted the file. Thomas, Vanessa, Grace, Malcolm, and several guests followed them upstairs. Lily's room looked smaller with so many adults in it. The vanity lights still burned around the mirror. A white veil hung over the chair. The floor vents sat open. One paper bird lay bent near the baseboard. Evelyn crossed to the window before anyone else. She did not go to the vent. She went to the narrow built-in cabinet beneath the sill, the one Daniel had hidden behind a vanity chair and a rack of dresses. Here, she said. Thomas knelt beside her. Daniel said, that cabinet was empty. Evelyn looked back at him. You remembered it fast for something that didn't matter. Thomas slid the brass key into the lower lock. The lock turned. Inside were old therapy drawings, a sealed envelope, and a blue folder labeled in Thomas Bell's handwriting. Protected Child Welfare, use Appendix B. The second wave broke through the room. Legal fact, no longer memory. Daniel reached for the folder. Evelyn stepped between them this time. Don't, she said. Vanessa moved beside her, blocking his other side. Thomas opened the first page. His voice trembled once, then steadied. Upon the death of Lily Hart Whitmore, the protected bedroom, associated trust portion, and attached grief care fund shall remain under the oversight of the child's primary caregiver, Evelyn Hart, for the purpose of therapeutic use benefiting bereaved children, unless released in writing by said caregiver. Malcolm swore softly. Thomas turned the page. Any sale, redevelopment, demolition, or conversion of the protected space requires Evelyn Hart's written consent. Absence of consent renders related transfer representations incomplete. Evelyn looked at Daniel. He looked smaller than he had in the ballroom, but he was not finished. This is sentimental nonsense, he said. A grieving mother wanted control. I signed many things during Lily's illness. I was exhausted. Evelyn pushed paper at me when I was vulnerable. That lie did not attack property. It attacked the years Evelyn had spent beside hospital beds while Daniel missed appointments. Before Evelyn could answer, Vanessa lifted her phone. Then explain this. She played the voice memo. Daniel's voice filled Lily's room. After tonight, Vanessa, you sign the operating consent, Malcolm releases the first wire, and this house stops being a mausoleum. If Evelyn raises her voice, people will see what I have dealt with for years. If she refuses the release, we have documentation that she was offered a clean exit. And if anything leaves this property with her staff, it becomes a security issue. Vanessa let the next line play. You'll sign what I put in front of you because you understand opportunity. That was 5 minutes ago, she said. Not during Lily's illness. Then Grace stepped forward with the photograph. She found this, Evelyn said. Grace turned it so the room could see Lily by the window, music box on her lap, Evelyn beside the cabinet. On the back, the childish handwriting tilted across the paper. Mommy hides safe things here. Vanessa's mother pressed her fingers to her mouth. Malcolm looked away. Grace spoke carefully. He was going to throw away the things that pointed to the file. Maybe he calls that moving on. But children don't write notes like this because they care about real estate. The third wave did not come from law. It came from the small photograph in a server's hands. Daniel had no polished sentence ready for Lily's handwriting. Evelyn placed the photo beside the appendix. Then she faced Daniel. "I am not keeping this room because I cannot let her go," she said. "I am keeping it because she asked us to make it useful when she couldn't stay." Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing persuasive came out. Downstairs, guests had gathered near the staircase. The videographer stood halfway up, still recording. Every word had traveled farther than Daniel intended. Thomas looked at Malcolm. "This transaction is suspended." Malcolm closed his phone. "My firm withdraws pending review." The silver pens remained downstairs, untouched under the roses. Daniel turned to Vanessa. "You are making a mistake." Vanessa removed her wedding ring and placed it on the vanity. "No," she said. "I almost signed one." Evelyn picked up the blue folder and Lily's music box. She did not ask Daniel to apologize. There were apologies too small for what they tried to cover. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back. The veil still hung where Lily's drawings had been. "Take that down," Evelyn said. No one argued. By midnight, the wedding flowers had begun to wilt. The roses on the signing table were still arranged around the silver pens, but no one had used them. The contract folder was gone with Thomas Bell. Malcolm Reed had left without shaking Daniel's hand. Vanessa had gone upstairs once, removed her gown from Lily's room, and left the house through the front door with her mother walking behind her in silence. Daniel stayed until the last guest disappeared. He did not ask Evelyn for forgiveness. He asked Thomas whether the appendix could be challenged. Thomas answered with a sentence Evelyn would remember longer than any apology. "You may challenge grief in court, Daniel. You cannot challenge a clause you signed." The next morning, no demolition crew came. Instead, Thomas filed an emergency notice preserving the protected room and the attached grief care fund. The wedding video, the waiver, Vanessa's recording, and Grace's photograph became part of the record. Daniel's attorneys stopped using the phrase private family matter after the third request for documents. Vanessa sent a statement through her own lawyer. It did not make her a hero. It did not pretend she had been innocent of cruelty. It simply confirmed that Daniel had hidden the beneficiary language from her and used the wedding reception to force a transaction before anyone could question it. Evelyn read the statement once, then placed it in the folder. She did not celebrate. There were victories that felt less like winning than like finally putting down something heavy. For 2 weeks, she returned to the house with Grace and a small crew. They took down the vanity lights. They folded the veil and mailed it to Vanessa's apartment. They carried out the trash bags and opened each one carefully, saving paper birds, hospital drawings, a cracked plastic star, and every book with Lily's name inside. Daniel's portrait still hung in the lower hall. Evelyn passed it each morning without touching it. On the 10th day, Grace took it down and leaned it against the wall. "Storage?" Grace asked. Evelyn looked at the empty space. "No," she said. "Archive." The music box took 3 days to repair. When it played again, the tune was thin but steady. 6 months later, the door to Lily's room was painted a soft blue. Not the old blue of illness, but a brighter one, chosen by the first group of children who came to the new grief room. There were cushions on the floor, a low shelf of books, a table with crayons, paper, birds, and a small sign that said, "You can remember here." Grace stood in the doorway on opening day, wearing a black catering jacket because she had come straight from work. "You sure about this?" she asked. Evelyn looked at the room. For years, she had thought keeping Lily's room untouched meant keeping Lily close. But untouched rooms could become locked rooms. And locked rooms could start serving the people who wanted the past to stay buried. A little boy with red-rimmed eyes approached the table and touched the music box with one careful finger. "Does it work?" he asked. Evelyn wound the key. The old song opened gently into the room. The boy listened, then looked up at her. Was this your daughter's room? Evelyn looked at the paper, birds turning softly in the air above the window. No, she said. Then she smiled, small and true. Not anymore. Now, it belongs to children who need a place to remember. The boy nodded as if that made perfect sense. Behind them, the door stayed open.